All right, so let's get into what we do on a daily basis, right?
Yep.
So we tend to eat in an 8 to 10 hour window, right? You're pretty good about the 8-hour window, right?
Yeah, and I have a job that is sort of more regimented with an office schedule to where it's easy for me to build in that specific amount of time every day. So,
right.
If you have a job that has more varying hours like yours,
right.
That eating window might have to move around a little bit.
Right. So what is your 8 hours usually?
So I usually, and it'll vary a little bit, but typically I start eating at 10:30 in the morning, and I'm done eating at 6:30 in the evening, and then of course 6:30 all the way back around to 10:30, I'm not eating.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
And it's good to note that for a big portion of that I'm asleep.
Right.
So yes. I don't know about you. I don't sleep eat. So it makes it pretty easy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think it's more manageable to think about that 16. It's like, wait, you're asleep for like 8 to 9 hours of it at least, right? So, and I'm similar. I do about 8 to 10 hours. It depends on my schedule because I am in a room seeing people. So I can't just like sneak out and grab a snack and break my fast that way. So I'm usually 10 a.m. to 7 on my late nights because I work until 7, or maybe 6:30 depending on if I'm done a little bit earlier in the day. So I probably average like between 14 would be light. I'm probably more 15 to 16, and you're pretty much always on 16.
Yeah, and for instance, if I have, say, a meeting at the office that happens to start right when I'm supposed to break my fast, then it becomes a judgment call. I'll look at the meeting and say, okay, it's only half an hour. I don't think it's going to run very long. I'll just wait, So you get to 16 and a half, 17 and a half, that's fine,
Right.
And usually you're interacting with people, you're busy. You might not even notice. It's not a big deal. If, on the other hand, I look like, well, it's a 2-hour-long meeting and it's about some really nasty topic, this is going to go a long time, I'm eating beforehand. I'll happily break at 15 or 15 and a half just so I don't have to sit in that meeting just going, when do I get to eat?
Right.
Just struggling to get through it.
Right. Yeah. Nasty meeting and environmental engineering. This can be rough.
It's a very, very nasty topic.
So this is a distinction between us and kind of what's out there on the interwebs with the time frame. With that 12 to 8 time frame, I tried it 1 day or 2 days, and I just found it completely unattainable. For a couple reasons. One, it was really hard to wait that long because you're active in the morning. And when you're active, you're burning a lot of glucose. And I'm sitting there talking with people about kind of intense stuff, and I'm trying to help them, and that takes a lot of energy. So I found myself feeling really depleted. My blood sugar plummeted. I was just really off. And then adrenal balance issues get triggered, which I am a little bit more sensitive adrenally, and a lot of women are in general. And we'll talk about that in a little bit with kind of some of the things that we noticed. But that 12 to 8 time period, I was just not a fan because I feel like that's a very long time to wait in the morning. And I know all the bulletproof folks talk about, just have the tea or the coffee with the butter in it, and those fats, like, they're not going to break your fast because they're going to be burned like ketones. I did try that. I just was not a fan. I did not feel like, I know you see reports of people online like, it gave me 4 hours of energy. And I was like, no, no, not.
So it's a lot to ask for a cup of
coffee with some butter in it. Yeah. Not a fan. And then coffee, especially, it taxes the adrenals. So you're spiking the adrenals, and then they're gonna kind of crash, and you might have some of that happen. So, So, and then the 8 p.m. to me too. Not a fan. It's really late to eat.
That's the part of it that bugs me with that 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. is, when we're done eating at 6:30 p.m. and, you go to bed, or at least we do, 4.5, 5 hours later, that's enough time to pass that, your digestion has kind of cooled off a little bit. You ate long enough ago that you're not going to bed while your stomach is still going, hey, I'm doing stuff. Can you keep the factory open for a little while longer?
Right.
So pushing it earlier, that to me was a major surprise in how good it was, in that, you go to bed, you think, well, gosh, then you're going to go to bed hungry, and then I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night hungry. Well, no, you're not, and in fact, your body's going to realize, okay, well, you haven't put any fuel in the tank for a while, so I'm supposed to be, just like kind of chilling out here. And it just seems to me that eating closer to when you go to bed, you're sending your body really mixed signals. Going, here's a bunch of fuel for stuff to do.
Right.
And now go lay down.
Right. Yes.
Come on.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. And then folks with blood sugar issues do usually, sometimes they'll wake up in the middle of the night and need to eat something. But usually with intermittent fasting, when you start to close that window down, those blood sugar issues tend to start to self-regulate, which is great. Yeah, and then from a Chinese medicine perspective, the digestive organs, each organ has a 2-hour period on the clock, and from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., the digestive organs are at their lowest energy point possible. So to me, it really doesn't make any sense to try to put food in after 7 when your digestion is already really shutting down for the day. So that's usually the cutoff that I really try to strive for, depending on work schedule. And then I notice I definitely feel better with that cutoff as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Not eating as late. So and then I wanted to ask you about how you usually look at it, right, in terms of the 8 and the 16, because I think you kind of look at it a little differently than most people.
Yeah, most people tend to look at it as, these are my 8 hours.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to these 8 hours. I don't care about the 8 hours.
Right.
What I care about is the 16. So if, say I have an appointment right after work and I get home late, it's like, all right, well, I had to eat a little bit later. I'm not going to shortchange my fasting window because my eating window went a little long.
Right.
So say I don't get to eat until 7:30, I'm going to try everything I can to not eat until 11:30 a.m. the next day, rather than my usual 10:30, where I'd only get a 15-hour fast. It's not a huge deal, but it is an important distinction. Which part of it do you care about more? Do you care about the eating window, or do you care about the not eating window? And I love food. I'm not a bad cook. I'm kind of a foodie. I really like eating. So the notion of, when we started this whole thing, the notion that the not eating window would be the thing that I cared about more, if you told my 3 years ago self that,
right,
he would have laughed in your face and said that's preposterous. But it's true. I really value the not eating window a lot more than the eating window.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you also really love it when you get to break your fast. I think that's one of your favorite things, right?
That's the best.
Yeah.
It's such a different appreciation for food, because as easy as I've been saying, it's very easy to execute the 16. It is. However, so for me, consistently every morning, mostly when I'm at work, it's not so bad on the weekends when I'm at home, but when I'm at my office, I know 10:30 is the cutoff. That's when I get to break my fast and I eat my breakfast. And I'm an engineer, so I eat the same thing every morning, just happily. I'm like kind of robotic, but
it's true.
So an hour before that, 9:30, I get hungry, and I get quite hungry. Mm-hmm. Not the modern day, like, you have that kind of mouth hungry thing where, mm-hmm, you're like, well, there's a bag of chips over there. Yeah, I could eat a few, and then I could eat like a few dozen more. Mm-hmm. It's not that. This is legitimate. I'm not thirsty. I don't just kind of want to eat for entertainment or some casual reason. I'm hungry.
Right.
And that's 9:30 a.m. like clockwork. I don't have to be near a clock, and I can tell you it's 9:30 because I'm really hungry.
Right.
And if I just power through it, and there's pretty much without question every morning when I hit that 9:30, I have a brief thought of, I'm not going to make it today. I'm gonna have to break at 15. I can't do it. If I wait 10 minutes, maybe 15, it goes away.
Yeah.
And then 10:30 rolls around, or 10:40 because I missed it or whatever. But 10:30 rolls around and I get to eat my breakfast, and it's a simple little thing. My breakfast every day is 2 hard-boiled eggs and a little thin slice of cheese. It is the greatest tasting thing on the planet. It's such a different way to appreciate food, because
mm-hmm,
you're so used to just eating an hour and a half ago, okay, we'll eat again, and then 2 hours later we'll eat again. You're not getting to that point of being really hungry, like you
right,
really want to eat.
Right.
So when you get to that point and you eat this just simple little hard-boiled egg, mm-hmm, it is so delicious. It's out of control delicious.
Yeah. And we'll get into some of those things about like what worked and what didn't work later. I'll add my commentary to that. But what else did I want you to say? Yeah, if we could talk a little bit about like how do you handle social engagements?
So, for me, it's actually doubly difficult. As you know, as they might not. So I'm a musician, and a very common setting for musicians to be in is in a bar, because
Right.
you're playing music in bars constantly. It's kind of the life of a musician. Most of the time music happens in bars. It's late at night. It's not in the afternoon. It's not, it's not first thing in the morning. It's well after the fasting is done. Most of the time I don't even arrive to a gig, maybe an hour or two after my fasting window has started. So I'm well into it. And what's the first thing that comes up? Oh, let me buy you a drink. Do you want some French fries? Do you want, any of this stuff? Some gigs, I'm totally good. No, I'm just gonna have some water. I'm good. Some people know, that I work with frequently know that this little fasting quirk about me, and
Yes.
they don't push it. They go, "Oh, can I get you a beer?" Like, "Oh no, I'm good. I'll just have some water." And then they don't push it. If you're playing with a group of people you've never met, played with before, then you have to explain to them, okay, so and I do this thing called intermittent fasting. Oh, what's that?
Right.
This whole dialogue starts, and then
You just send them this video.
Well, it wasn't available previously. So then you have to make a judgment call. Mm-hmm. What's more important to me right now? The social exchange or maintaining my fast? And there's trade-offs either way, obviously. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I break the rules of the fast, sometimes I don't. Mm-hmm. And it's just very situationally dependent. If most of the time, or most of the days through the year, I'm maintaining my fast, I don't feel guilty if on a small handful of occasions, at 8:30 or 9 p.m., I have a beer.
Right. Yes.
It's not the end of the world. And then the next morning, it's kind of a judgment call. Okay, I stopped eating at 6:30, but then, I was on a gig and I had something to drink. So I should start it at this further out point and then not eat until 11:45 or noon or whatever it is. But who knows? I was out late working.
Right.
Maybe I'm a little more depleted, and I need to eat at that 10:30 point again, or maybe not. It really varies. So there's definitely, you have to build in some flexibility with it. If it gets too dogmatic, I think it can be sort of problematic.
Yeah. I like it. It rhymed.
Unintentional.
No, but you're a musician, so.
Hey.
Yeah. I think that's really great with the flexibility. And to be clear, too, we do the intermittent fasting every day, the 16/8, right?
Yep.
So, reading about it, some people don't do it. They try to do it a few days a week. Sometimes that's a nice way to kind of come into it a little bit, right? But so I think, if you're trying to do something every day, there needs to be some flexibility. And to be clear too, we don't look at it as like a cheat day. Like we're really looking forward to it. Like, oh my God, we get to like not, we get to eat later or earlier. Usually we're just like, oh, I don't feel as good.
Which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
The idea of a cheat day, I don't think quite fits this model. It's more of an issue of there was some external circumstance that came up and it forced you to do things a little differently than you would have liked. And hey, that's probably okay.
Right. Yeah. Which is really nice to be flexible. And when you're eating in that 8-hour window as well, we're talking about, you don't need to be eating like every 2 hours or so, but like you feel like you're eating that much because you have a smaller window of time to fit in your normal calories. So, usually it's like 3 hours, maybe 2 hours between each meal. So that's kind of a nice way to maintain blood sugar. If you do have blood sugar issues, there is that idea that, you need to eat small, frequent meals with a little bit of protein and fat, and that is great. And intermittent fasting, I think, lends itself really well to that because you are eating kind of closer together, or you can be. So I just wanted to point that out. All right. Yeah, so in terms of what we do you feel like we do anything else per day that I haven't talked about?
Specifically intermittent fasting, not really.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? That's
It's
really all there is to it.
Not a lot of nuts and bolts involved.
However, there was kind of an adjustment period for both of us doing this, where we did not start at the 16 initially, right? We both started around 12 hours. And then I moved up to 14 before Chris did, because he thought I was kind of crazy.
I still think you're a little crazy.
Thank
That's
you.
okay.
Yeah, well, I'm endearingly crazy. Yeah, and then I moved up to 16. And again, like I said, my sweet spot's more like 15 to 16, sometimes 14, and then Chris really got up to 16. So there was an adjustment period that happened there for both of us.
Yeah, definitely.
Over the course of several months too, right? It didn't happen initially. It was kind of waiting for the hormones to adjust a bit.
It took me a full year to get to 16.
Okay, and it took me probably more like 4 or 5 months to get to 16, somewhere in there. It was probably 1 or 2 months at each kind of interval. That I just decided, the 12-hour was a good place to start. And then, the 14 seemed to be a little bit more challenging, but okay. And then the 16 is kind of off and on for me, but you really love it. Yeah.
Yeah, the 12 for me, which my approach to the 12 was cut it off at 8 p.m., start again at 8 a.m. So, 8 to 8, either side, you were eating or you weren't eating. And it worked out well for me because, I work an office job, so I get to the office at 7:38 in the morning. And so in the mornings, it was like I was getting up, getting ready for work, go to work, and then when I got there, a few minutes after I got to work usually, I'd have a snack.
Right.
Okay, that was pretty easy to facilitate. My mornings were no big deal. When I started, eliminating food after 8 p.m., I became very aware of how dependent I'd become on, we're sitting on the couch, it's 9 p.m., get up, walk through the kitchen to get a glass of water, and, let me grab just a little handful of crackers. What's that? Oh, just a little nibble of that here and there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not much, but it does sort of restart that digestion thing. And when you get rid of that, it was a massive shift. And at first, it was a really unpleasant one.
Yeah, that's something we have to talk about, yes.
We would be 9:30 at night, and
I think both of us would just be like, we're so hungry.
Yeah, I was furious. I would attack somebody for a saltine cracker at that point, just because that is the rhythm and the pattern that I'd gotten used to.
Yeah.
And then after a while, that got kind of okay, and then it was no big deal. And then when I went from the 12 to the 17, so I bumped the 8 p.m. back to 7 p.m., and I bumped the 8 a.m. out to 9 a.m., it was no big deal.
Yeah.
Nothing.
You'd already broken that behavioral pattern.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. It was nothing. Then about a year later when I said, okay, I'm going to make this 16 thing happen. So then my 7 p.m. went back to 6:30 p.m., and my 9 a.m. pushed all the way out to 10:30 a.m. Now all of a sudden, I'm thinking, okay, before the evenings were really hard and the mornings were no big deal. Well, with the 16-8, it flipped to where the evenings, still no big deal. The mornings were, and still are, pretty tough.
Yeah.
It is something you have to it gives you a different appreciation for the word hunger. It sort of resets your sense of hunger in a sense, the whole thing of like, you're just eating because you're mouth hungry, or you just eat for the social or the entertainment, because eating's fun. Mm-hmm. But when you eat because you're actually hungry,
right,
it's completely different. So the mornings, like I said, were and still are pretty challenging. They've gotten better, but it's not as if I just breeze right on through.
Right.
So,
right.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Okay, cool.
Hi, I'm Dr. Liz Carter, and this is my husband, Chris. And furthermore,
Can I?
my PhD was in xenobiology, fasting.
I'm just gonna take that.
Very well.